Let me tell you about the time a clipboard-wielding tyrant decided to tow what she assumed was a crusty suburban dad's minivan. A vehicle that, to her tightly wound eyes, probably screamed unwashed plebeian and decreased property value. What she didn't know, because entitled Karens rarely do, is that she wasn't just picking a fight with a minivan. She was messing with a fully equipped undercover FBI surveillance vehicle. And yeah, the suburban dad? That was me. I'm Mike Richardson. I work deep undercover for the FBI, specializing in white-collar crimes, organized scams, and generally anything that involves very wealthy people doing very illegal things while hiding behind a golf club membership. For the past 8 years, my cover has been unshakable. Divorced dad, 2 kids, imaginary. Part-time real estate appraiser, also imaginary. And owner of the most aggressively unremarkable Honda Odyssey you've ever seen. It's beige. Of course it is. Everything in my life is beige when I'm undercover. My assignment brought me to Willowbrook Estates, a suburban development so meticulously boring it looked like someone had asked an AI to design the most middle-class neighborhood in existence. Every house was a slightly different shade of oatmeal. The lawns, cut within military-grade standards. The community signage, gold leaf on hunter green, baby. Fancy enough to say we're classy, but not so fancy as to suggest you're actually rich. The first time I drove into Willowbrook, I swear I heard the neighborhood whisper, "You must conform." Perfect. It was the kind of place where people reported their neighbors for using the wrong trash bags. The kind of place where they post signs that say no skateboarding next to signs that say community fun is encouraged, with the same breathless hypocrisy as a HR rep firing you, with love and respect. That's when I met Patricia Hendricks. Now, I want you to close your eyes and picture the word Karen. Got it. Now multiply that mental image by 10, slap a laminated HOA manual in her hand, and give her a voice that sounds like Siri got rebooted with passive-aggressive firmware. Patricia was in her mid-50s, and everything about her screamed overcompensation. She wore tailored pantsuits like she was about to take over a tech company. Her hair had that complicated shape. You know, the kind of shape that requires both a diagram and a stylist who's legally obligated to nod at everything she says. Her smile could cut glass, and her tone suggested that, at any given moment, she might call the police on someone for breathing incorrectly within community limits. I'd been living at 1247 Maple Lane for about 6 weeks when I had my first Patricia encounter. I was crouched behind my minivan in the driveway, loading up what looked like soccer gear. In reality, it was a cleverly disguised set of high-tech surveillance equipment, thermal cameras in duffel bags, audio recorders wrapped in shin guards, and a drone hidden inside what appeared to be a tackle box labeled Little League Champs. I was halfway through stuffing a fake water jug full of encrypted drives under the third-row seat when I heard the unmistakable sound of a woman walking with purpose. Click, click, click. Stiletto heels on suburban pavement. Always a good sign, right? "Excuse me," said a voice that had clearly been trained in the ancient art of passive aggression. "Are you the new resident at 1247? I stood up and turned to see Patricia in all her glory, clipboard clutched like a holy relic. "That's me, Mike Richardson," I said, trying not to smirk. "Moved in last month. I'm Patricia Hendricks, HOA president." She extended her hand like a monarch might present a glove to a peasant. Her handshake was stiff and brittle, like shaking hands with a cold breadstick. "Lovely to meet you, Patricia." She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here to discuss some concerns regarding your vehicle." I turned and looked at my minivan. Beige, dented, a little dusty, but otherwise completely average. Concerns? Well, it's been parked in the same location for more than 48 hours, which is a violation of Section 4.2b of the Willowbrook Community Guidelines. She tapped her clipboard like she was unveiling classified intel. And, well, it's not exactly the aesthetic standard we're aiming for in this neighborhood. I blinked. "It's a Honda Odyssey." She nodded solemnly. "Yes, that's exactly the problem." I nearly laughed. I had once chased an arms dealer through a Bangkok market in flip-flops. Now I was being scolded for the paint condition of my undercover van. "I wasn't aware of a 48-hour parking rule," I said, keeping my tone as mild as chamomile tea. I'll make sure to move it around a bit more often. Her smile grew tighter. See that you do? We take pride in our neighborhood, Mr. Richardson. It's a community of standards. We hold each other accountable here. I'd hate for there to be complications. Complications, I repeated, resisting the urge to salute. Got it. And with that, she marched away like she'd just won a battle in some invisible war. I watched her go, a ridiculous silhouette against a backdrop of beige houses and artificially perfect landscaping. I turned back to the minivan, chuckled to myself, and muttered, "Lady, you have no idea what kind of can of worms you're poking with that clipboard." But Patricia? Oh, she thought she'd just successfully wrangled another sloppy neighbor into submission. If only she knew. I should have known that first encounter with Patricia Hendricks wasn't just a one-off brush with suburban bureaucracy. It was the opening salvo of a campaign so petty, so obsessively micromanaged, it would make North Korean border guards look laid back. But I was naive. I'd faced down cartel enforcers and corrupt politicians. So how bad could one overzealous HOA president be? Spoiler, worse than the cartel guys. At least they didn't quote from page 7 of the Community Standards Handbook every time you trimmed your hedges at a non-optimal angle. Over the next few weeks, Patricia came at me with the consistency of a malfunctioning Roomba, annoying, loud, and constantly bumping into my life where she wasn't wanted. My grass. Apparently 0.5 inches too long. That's right, half an inch. She actually measured it. I don't know what kind of dystopian landscaping manual she was using, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it was titled, How to Weaponize Lawn Maintenance. My garbage cans. Visible from the street post pickup. Translation, I was late bringing them in by about 42 minutes because I was, out doing actual law enforcement. But the piece de resistance? My minivan. Patricia had decided it was the visual equivalent of a rusty chainsaw left on the front porch. She claimed it was aesthetically incompatible with the neighborhood's image. I reminded her it was a 2015 Odyssey, not a decaying mattress. She responded by citing section 3.7.4a of the HOA handbook like it was scripture. That section, in case you're wondering, is apparently about vehicular harmony with adjacent facades. Yes, she really said that. Vehicular harmony. The woman had created a religion out of the HOA guidelines, and she was its most fervent missionary. And I was the blasphemer parking a heretic chariot in her holy land. Then came the violation notices. At first, it was 1 or 2 slapped onto my front door like a pizza menu from a desperate local restaurant. But they grew in number and boldness. Excessive lawn inconsistency. Trash bin display negligence. Non-approved mailbox tint. And my favorite, vehicle aura negatively affecting property cohesion. Aura, not exhaust. Aura. I thought about taping one back to her front door with a note that said, "Violation, your whole personality." But I restrained myself. Barely. Then one afternoon, I came home from a 10-hour surveillance stint tailing a money launderer through a chain of salad bars. I just wanted to eat something that wasn't granola, shower, and maybe binge-watch a reality show about people making knives in a forge. Instead, I was greeted by a bright orange final notice plastered to my door like some kind of Halloween-themed eviction threat. Violation of community standards, final notice. Offenses. Vehicle in violation of aesthetic guidelines. Failure to maintain lawn to HOA specifications. Improper garbage can placement. Fine, $500. Failure to comply within 48 hours will result in additional penalties. $500. For what amounted to a slightly dusty minivan and a blade of grass standing too tall. I went inside, took a deep breath, and did what any rational person would do. I called the HOA management company. Surely this was an error, a rogue clipboard warrior acting beyond her limits, right? Wrong. The poor soul on the other end of the line sounded like someone who had fielded more Patricia-related complaints than any human should have to endure. Yes, sir, the woman sighed. Mrs. Hendricks is authorized to issue fines. Though, those amounts are, well, she's known to be very passionate. Passionate. Translation, she's a tyrant with too much time and a dangerously inflated sense of purpose. Still, I figured I'd try diplomacy. I wasn't here to start a war. I had an operation to run and a cover to maintain. The last thing I needed was to become the focus of a suburban soap opera. So, against my better judgment, I knocked on Patricia's door. She opened it in a crisp navy power suit and a pearl necklace that screamed, "I'm about to audit your existence." Her smile was tight, lips painted a shade of red that should have come with a warning label. Clipboard, of course, was in hand, probably surgically attached at this point. "Mr. Richardson, I assume this is about the fines." "Yeah, I was hoping we could talk about that. I think there may have been some misunderstanding." Her eyes flicked down to her clipboard, like she was scanning the book of Revelations. "There's no misunderstanding. The violations are quite clear. Your vehicle is not compliant with neighborhood aesthetics, your lawn exceeds regulation height, and your refuse containers. Well, let's not even discuss those." "Right?" I said, forcing a smile. "But $500 for first-time offenses? That feels excessive." Patricia's expression didn't change, but her voice took on a chilling flatness. "Excessive? Mr. Richardson, do you understand how fragile property values are in a community like this? One non-compliant vehicle, one unruly yard, one improperly placed trash receptacle, and the whole ecosystem begins to crumble." I blinked. "You're talking about an ecosystem over a minivan. And yet here we are." She turned a page on her clipboard with reverence. "The fine stands. And if you continue to disregard our guidelines, further actions will be taken." "Such as?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "We have ways of dealing with problematic residents." I almost laughed. Almost. But the thing is, when you're undercover, even a delusional HOA president becomes a variable you can't ignore. So I nodded, thanked her for her time, and left. Inside, I stared at the notice on my door again. $500. It was absurd. But this wasn't just about money. It was about control. Patricia wasn't enforcing rules. She was asserting dominance. And like any bad boss or petty tyrant, she didn't realize that pushing the wrong person just a little too far could be catastrophic. Unfortunately for her, I'm that wrong person. Let me tell you what finally snapped my patience. Waking up to find my FBI-issued surveillance van transformed into a bureaucratic art installation. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are when I run dead drops and pick up encrypted SD cards disguised as Lunchables. I opened the front door, coffee in hand, and there it was, my poor, beige minivan, now smothered in a bright orange pox of violation stickers. 20. I counted. They were plastered across the windshield, the side windows, even the rearview mirrors, because, apparently, the ability to see while driving is a secondary concern to Patricia's war on unsightliness. Each sticker was hand-signed by Patricia, as if Michelangelo himself had decorated my vehicle with passive-aggressive citations. Let me share a few of my favorites. Violation: vehicle parked at a suboptimal angle. Violation: excessive dust accumulation suggests neglect. Violation: tire pressure not documented, presumed non-compliant. Violation: general lack of showroom sparkle. Showroom sparkle. My van had been working surveillance shifts longer than most TikTok influencers have been alive. It didn't need sparkle. It needed plausible deniability. I stood in my driveway, barefoot, coffee forgotten, staring at this crime scene of absurdity. The neighbors were peeking through their blinds like extras in a Desperate Housewives episode, half horrified, half entertained. And there, across the street, behind her living room window, stood Patricia, clipboard in hand, grinning. Actually grinning. That was the moment I decided to stop playing nice. Because here's the thing. When you're undercover, you keep your head down. Blend in. But when someone drags your cover into the spotlight and turns your surveillance bin into a Halloween decoration, that's not just annoying, that's a security breach. So I went to work. Not on her lawn. On her. First stop? Public records. Patricia Hendricks had been HOA president for 7 years, almost biblical in HOA terms. During that time, the HOA's fine income had skyrocketed. We're talking a 400% increase. Not coincidentally, So had the size of her jewelry collection and the frequency of her trips to consulting conferences in Florida. Next, I pulled up financial disclosures, utility reports, and tax filings. Her property management consulting company? Yeah, she was cutting checks to herself from the HOA account for administrative work. Administrative work that apparently included harassing residents over mailbox colors and unauthorized wind chimes. And just when I thought it couldn't get better, I found the cherry on top. Patricia had a record. Not a criminal one. Yet, but she'd been asked to resign from not one, but two previous HOA positions in other towns. Both times, financial irregularities and abuse of authority. Classic HOA speak for, she embezzled funds and acted like a tyrant. This woman wasn't just annoying, she was a serial HOA dictator. So I started collecting. Every notice she taped to my door. Every time she trespassed onto my lawn with her tape measure like some kind of twisted garden cop. Every single passive-aggressive conversation. And I wasn't alone. Mrs. Chun from 2 doors down fined $300 for a mailbox that was not an approved shade of pewter. The Johnsons? Hit with a $400 fine for a garden gnome that stood at an unregulated height. The Patels? Their security light apparently violated light pollution expectations. And Mr. Washington? Oh man. Fined for having his grill visible from the street during a cookout. A cookout. On the 4th of July. It wasn't enforcement, it was extortion. Patricia had turned suburban rules into her personal ATM, and people were paying up because they didn't think they had a choice. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a neighborhood squabble. This was a scam. A slow-motion shakedown with a pastel paint job. So I started making quiet visits, asking neighbors for copies of their violation letters. I didn't say much, just listened. You'd be amazed how eager people are to talk when they think someone might finally stand up to the bully on the block. And the more I heard, the clearer it became. Patricia didn't just love power. She was addicted to it. She needed control the way toddlers need snacks, loudly, constantly, and with zero sense of proportion. I kept my cool, kept documenting. I needed one more thing, a trigger, something to really push Patricia over the edge. Something that would force her to cross the line from petty to criminal. Spoiler, I didn't have to wait long. It came wrapped in the ugliest orange tone notice I'd ever seen. The day started off like any other. Too much coffee, not enough sleep, and a to-do list that included surveillance, fake HOA smiles, and pretending to care about patio furniture symmetry. I just spent 12 hours sitting in my dusty Odyssey, watching a guy named Vito transfer crypto at a vape shop, when I pulled into my driveway and felt off. It took a few seconds for my brain to register what was wrong. The driveway was empty. No van. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it had finally broken down on its own and decided to quit life. But then I saw it, flapping in the wind, taped to my garage door like a ransom note from someone who shops exclusively at Staples. Vehicle towed for non-compliance with community standards. Outstanding violations, $2,300. Plus towing and storage, $300. Contact Hendricks Property Management for release details. $2,600. For imaginary grass height crimes and a Honda Odyssey that didn't meet Patricia's ocular standards. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was theft. Patricia Hendricks had just towed my surveillance vehicle, which, in case that somehow doesn't scream bad idea, was currently housing roughly $50,000 worth of federal surveillance tech, including encrypted data drives, signal triangulation equipment, and a very expensive drone camouflaged to look like a soccer ball. She hadn't just messed with my cover. She'd hijacked federal property. I called the towing company, trying to keep my voice steady while plotting 10 different types of revenge. Yeah, we towed a beige Odyssey from Willowbrook this morning, the guy said cheerfully, as if he hadn't just stumbled into a felony. HOA president called it in personally. Patricia Hendricks, right? She's a regular. Super detail-oriented. Yeah, I've noticed. You'll just need to pay the fines she submitted, plus our towing and daily storage rate. $2,600 total. We only take cashier's checks. Let me ask you something, I said slowly, already dialing with my other hand. Did anyone tell you that vehicle was a government asset? Long pause. Then, wait, what? Hang tight. You'll be getting another call soon. Next up was the one number I save for real emergencies. Like cartel stings going sideways, or, say, when a rogue HOA president impounds federal equipment in an act of HOA vigilantism. Special Agent in Charge Martinez came the voice on the other end. No nonsense. Sharper than a buzz cut in boot camp. Yeah. Hey, Jennifer, it's Mike. We have a situation. My surveillance vehicle has been towed. Silence. By who? The suspects. Worse, I said. The HOA. Another silence. This one laced with disbelief. You're telling me a Suburban Homeowners Association president just commandeered a federal vehicle? Technically, she thinks she's enforcing aesthetic standards. I think we're in unlawful seizure of federal property territory. There was a long sigh, equal parts rage, amusement, and the resigned horror of someone realizing she'd have to explain this to her boss. Mike, please tell me she didn't tamper with anything. I won't know until I get it back. But she's demanding ransom. Sorry, I mean fines, to release it. Okay, that's it. Backup is en route. Sit tight, Agent Richardson. Patricia Hendricks is about to learn exactly what happens when you tow the wrong damn van. Click. I stepped outside and looked across the street. There she was, Patricia, watering her azaleas like she hadn't just committed a federal offense. Clipboard tucked under one arm, smugness radiating off her like cheap perfume. I raised my coffee mug in salute. She waved. Oh, Patricia, you absolute maniac. You really thought you were the queen of this cul-de-sac. You didn't realize the battlefield just changed zip codes from suburbia to the Southern District's federal court docket. And girl, they do not play. If there's one thing you learn in undercover work, it's that timing is everything. So when three matte black SUVs rolled into Willowbrook Estates at exactly 7 a.m. the next morning, right on cue, I made sure to be standing at my window, coffee in hand, enjoying the show. You'd think it was a presidential motorcade rolling up to negotiate suburban peace treaties. In reality, it was a bunch of federal agents coming to explain, in very precise legal language, that HOA power does not extend to impounding FBI equipment. I watched with something close to glee as Patricia's front door swung open. There she stood, robe, curlers, clipboard, naturally. She clutched it like it was a congressional gavel, even as two federal agents and an assistant U.S. attorney walked up her front steps. From across the street, I could already see the stages of her realization. Confusion, indignation, oh no, followed by full-body panic. The kind that starts in your neck and works its way into your soul. Agent Sarah Kim was leading the charge, a steel-spine professional who could make IRS agents sweat. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I knew her tone. Cool, patient, and absolutely uncompromising. Patricia began gesturing wildly. Her robe flared like a cape caught in a wind tunnel. She pointed at Agent Kim, then at her clipboard, then back at the house, as if the structural integrity of her hydrangeas might somehow justify towing government property. Eventually, the clipboard was lowered. 10 minutes later, Patricia was escorted to one of the SUVs, not in cuffs yet, but firmly invited for questioning. She turned to glance at her kingdom one last time, like Napoleon realizing Elba didn't have enough wine. Meanwhile, Agent Kim crossed the street and knocked on my door. I opened it, smirking. So how'd it go? Oh, the usual, she said, brushing imaginary lint off her blazer. She tried to argue that you were in violation of federal code for failing to maintain vehicular standards. Also claimed we needed an HOA-approved visitor permit to be on her porch. I nearly choked on my coffee. Please tell me you recorded that. Every word, Kim said, her grin sharp enough to slice a shrub. The assistant U.S. attorney was particularly impressed when she threatened us with community ordinance-level litigation. She really said that? Verbatim. I motioned toward the driveway. Any news on the van? Oh, it's on its way back. The towing company practically fainted when we told them what they took. They're waiving the fees and filing a complaint against Hendricks. Apparently, she failed to mention the federal equipment part when she requested the tow. Shocking, I deadpanned. But the best part? The federal team hadn't just come for the van. They'd come with a nice fat dossier, compiled from everything I'd gathered over the last few weeks, detailing Patricia's real HOA legacy. Fake consulting fees, forged board member signatures, and tens of thousands of dollars siphoned into personal accounts under the guise of administrative improvements. Turns out financial crimes had been sniffing around HOA fraud patterns statewide. And Patricia's operation? It was textbook. Agent Kim broke it down while we waited for the van to arrive. Preliminary numbers show about $150,000 in suspicious expenditures. Multiple vendor payments to shell companies that don't exist. HOA dues funneled into her personal consulting firm. She really turned HOA fines into a full-blown side hustle. More like a felony startup. 2 hours later, my minivan returned like a soldier coming home from war. Still dusty, still deeply uncool, but now carrying the aura of undisputed victory. The tow company's rep couldn't stop apologizing. "We didn't know, man. She said it was an abandoned eyesore. I'm so sorry." "No problem," I said, slapping the roof like a proud dad. "This baby's seen worse." They left, and I stood in the driveway, hands on hips, watching as Patricia's kingdom quietly crumbled behind her garden gnome army and fake landscaping awards. Game. Set. Minivan. By noon, Willowbrook Estates was buzzing harder than a busted AC unit in a heat wave. Turns out, when 3 black SUVs roll into your neighborhood and escort your self-appointed queen into the back seat for a friendly conversation, word gets around faster than Patricia could say non-compliant hedge trimming. The gossip fire ignited by breakfast was a full-blown inferno by lunch. My phone rang for the first time at 1:07 p.m. It was Mrs. Chun, lovely woman, allergic to drama but currently vibrating with it. "Mr. Richardson? I heard about Patricia. The FBI? Please tell me this is real." "Oh, it's real. She's being questioned about misappropriated HOA funds, false citations, and towing a federal vehicle." Mrs. Chin gasped so loudly, I could hear her earrings jingle. She fined me for using the wrong type of mulch. Said it was aesthetic sabotage. "Do you think I can get that $150 back?" "You and about half the block." And that was just the start. The Johnsons called. The Patels. The Millers. Mr. Peterson from down the street, who claimed to be a Vietnam vet but spent most of his days aggressively pruning his roses while blasting swing music from 1963. "About damn time someone stood up to that clipboard witch," Peterson said, cracking open a lukewarm beer mid-call. She fined me for having my mower visible while I was using it. She said the noise disrupted community serenity. I told her to go disrupt herself. I couldn't stop smiling. This wasn't just neighborly venting. It was a rebellion. Everyone had a Patricia story, and they were finally coming out of their homes, emboldened by the sight of her being escorted away like a misbehaving poodle. People compared fine notices like war medals, shared screenshots of her emails like battle plans. It was equal parts group therapy and revenge-fueled book club. Turns out Patricia hadn't just been a tyrant. She'd been running a suburban pay-to-play scam. You paid up or you suffered. There was no appealing, no discussion, just arbitrary judgment and a rapidly growing stack of pastel notices that ruined weekends and family barbecues. And then came the emergency HOA meeting, scheduled for that same evening. Short notice? Absolutely. But after what happened that morning, the board had no choice. They booked the community center, expecting maybe 20 residents. Over 100 showed up. Standing room only. Some brought popcorn. Literally. I saw someone passing out sodas like it was movie night. Up front stood Tom Wilson, a mild-mannered accountant with the energy of a man who'd been quietly ignored for 5 years and was now getting the mic he deserved. His glasses were fogged. His hands shook just slightly. "I want to start by apologizing," he said. We should have noticed what Patricia was doing. We trusted her. But the fines, the contractor payments, the towing, none of that was approved by the full board. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "What happens to the money she stole?" someone yelled from the back. Tom straightened. "We've been in contact with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Their goal is full restitution to all affected residents. They're also freezing her assets." Another voice, Mr. Peterson, bless his crusty soul, shouted, "What about my damn mower violation?" That's when I stood up. You could hear the oxygen evacuate the room. Suddenly, every eye was on me. I cleared my throat. Some of you know me as Mike, the guy with the apparently offensive Honda Odyssey. But I'm also the federal agent who's been gathering evidence against Patricia for the past month. Gasps. One audible, holy crap. I've documented nearly 40 violations that were either completely fabricated or based on fake rules. Your cases? They're part of the investigation. Most of these citations? They're getting tossed. The room erupted in applause. Not polite clapping, standing ovation level cheering. Like someone had just announced HOA Christmas was coming early and we were all getting refunds. Tom nodded. Effective immediately, the board is suspending all fines issued by Patricia pending independent review. We'll be hiring a forensic accountant to investigate HOA funds from the last 5 years. Someone near the front said, "Does this mean she's going to jail?" A pause. Then Tom said, "Let's just say, she won't be presiding over mailbox paint colors anytime soon." More cheering. And somewhere, in the back corner, I swear a bottle of champagne was popped. It was a turning point. The neighbors who once feared her clipboard now rallied like she was a defeated dictator. Patricia's kingdom was falling, one mulch violation and fraudulent garden gnome assessment at a time. The HOA wasn't perfect, but now? It was finally ours again. 2 weeks later, the county newspaper dropped the headline that sent a ripple of vindication across every lawn in Willowbrook. Local HOA president indicted on 14 counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, mail fraud. There it was, in glorious black and white. A photo of Patricia, looking like a deflated Macy's parade balloon, clutching a handbag that probably cost more than my van. She wasn't wearing her signature pearls, just the haunted eyes of someone who finally realized the rules apply to her too. The article was a work of art. It laid out everything. The $150,000 siphoned into her consulting firm, the bogus fines, the falsified HOA documents, the shell payments to companies with no staff or website, just P.O. boxes in towns where even the tumbleweeds look suspicious. But the real drama? That unfolded at the next HOA meeting, where the board, now led by Tom Wilson and 2 freshly elected, clipboard-free residents, invited everyone to discuss the future of Willowbrook Estates. The room was packed. Reporters, neighbors, 2 off-duty cops, and, weirdly, someone live-streaming it like it was the Super Bowl of suburbia. Tom opened the meeting like a man who'd just been handed a flamethrower and told, "Please clear this snowbank of corruption." "First," he said, "we're rescinding all fines issued personally by Patricia Hendricks over the past 3 years. If you paid them, we're working with law enforcement to secure refunds. If you still owe, consider your debt erased." Cue standing ovation number 1. "We're also eliminating several of Patricia's custom regulations," he continued, holding up a comically large binder, "including, but not limited to, the regulation gnome height limit, mandatory garage curtain rules, mailbox color compliance audits, and the No Sidewalk Chalk initiative." Yes, that was real. She once fined a family $75 for a hopscotch game drawn in pastel. Mrs. Chun leaned over and whispered, "I hope she gets sentenced to painting mailboxes in prison, with the wrong shade of gray." We were laughing when someone shouted, "What about her house?" Tom cleared his throat. "Her assets have been frozen, including the property. It will likely be sold to help repay the embezzled funds." I leaned forward. "So she's actually going to lose it all?" Tom nodded. "House, pension, reputation, everything. Now, I'm not a vengeful man, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel delicious." Patricia spent years making people afraid of flower pots and bird feeders. And now, she was Googling minimum security facility commissary options and probably learning that clipboards aren't allowed in prison. Later that week, I received confirmation from Agent Kim. "Patricia's taking a plea deal," she said. "Full restitution, 18 months in federal prison, and 5 years supervised release. She's cooperating, but she's done." What about the rest of her board? 3 of them didn't even know they were on the board. She forged their signatures. One thought being on the HOA meant she was just part of a mailing list. We both laughed. Still, Kim added, your surveillance notes were what cracked the case. The photos, the conversations, hell, even the lawn violation tracking spreadsheet you made. I did get a little carried away, I admitted. No, that was a masterpiece. Seriously, my team printed it and hung it in the office. It's called the Spreadsheet of Doom. I mean, if I was going to be known for something, that's not a bad legacy. In the following days, Patricia's story spread. Not just locally, statewide. Other HOA watchdog groups reached out. News outlets covered the scandal like it was a reality show. And the best part? The HOA tyrant takedown led to actual legislative reform. A state senator introduced a bill that required external audits for any HOA collecting more than $25,000 in annual dues. It passed unanimously. Patricia had wanted to be a community leader. Instead, she became a cautionary tale. And somewhere, deep in her concrete-colored jail cell, I hope she's thinking about that time she told me, we have ways of dealing with problematic residents. Because now, so do we. 6 months later, Patricia Hendricks stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to 14 counts of fraud. Wire, mail, financial mismanagement, you name it, she did it. The court ordered full restitution to the HOA, 18 months in federal prison, 5 years of supervised release, and forfeiture of her property to help repay the stolen funds. Her lawyer, who I'm fairly certain was billing by the syllable, tried to play the she was under stress card. But no one bought it. Not the jury, not the judge, and certainly not the neighborhood she'd spent years terrorizing over wind chimes and paint swatches. And poetic justice? Oh, it showed up with confetti. Patricia lost her house. Yep, the very temple of suburban dominance where she had ruled with a rhinestone fist and a stack of printed bylaws thicker than a phone book. The sold sign went up in her front yard 3 months after sentencing. A sweet young couple with 2 little girls moved in. They planted sunflowers and put a rainbow welcome mat on the porch. Half the neighborhood cried tears of joy. The new HOA, rebuilt from the smoldering ruins of Patricia's clipboard empire, now had actual humans on the board. People who believed in common sense and didn't issue fines for unregulated lawn flamingos. Tom Wilson led the charge. He even rewrote the community handbook. Gone were the arbitrary rules. No more 48-hour vehicle movement schedules. No more pre-approved mulch types. No more excessive friendliness violations for dogs. Yes, that one happened to the Miller's golden retriever, who once got fined for licking a mail carrier. Even the garden gnome policy got a revamp. As long as it doesn't swear or glow in the dark, it's probably fine. And as for me, I wrapped up my original investigation, the one that had brought me to Willowbrook in the first place. The money laundering ring I'd been tracking? Cracked wide open. 8 indictments, 3 convictions so far, and a smuggled yacht seized off the coast of Florida. But the highlight of my entire time there? That minivan. Still beige. Still dusty. Still a federal workhorse in the body of a glorified PDA shuttle. After all the drama, I drove it until my next transfer. It even made it into our department's annual, most unlikely surveillance vehicle slideshow. On my last day in Willowbrook, I packed the van one final time. No more stakeouts. No more fake juice boxes hiding in encrypted drives. Just as I was locking up, Mrs. Chen knocked on my door. She was holding a plate of cookies and a card. "We wanted to thank you," she said. "Not just for dealing with Patricia, but for reminding us that we don't have to be afraid of our own neighborhood." The card was signed by almost everyone on the street. Inside it, a photo of Patricia's old house with the sold sign in front. Underneath, someone had written in Sharpie, "Thanks for helping us take down the clipboard tyrant." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the cookies. As I drove out of Willowbrook for the last time, I passed by the Hendricks house. The new owners were outside, their kids running through a sprinkler. One of them had drawn chalk on the sidewalk, a neon hopscotch masterpiece with stars and hearts and completely unregulated colors. I slowed down, smiled, and waved. Because here's the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't come in the form of a courtroom. Sometimes it comes in a dusty minivan driven by a man everyone underestimated. Sometimes It comes in a kid drawing chalk stars on the exact sidewalk someone once tried to find them for touching. And sometimes it shows up at 7 a.m. in 3 black SUVs with a federal warrant and zero tolerance for HOA nonsense. Patricia Hendricks thought she was untouchable, thought her clipboard gave her authority. Turns out, the only thing it earned her was an 18-month sabbatical and a permanent place on every HOA training slide titled, "What Absolute Power Should Never Look Like." She wanted control. She got consequences. And I got the best undercover win of my career and cookies. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.